Hello, class, and welcome back to week three's content. We'll be entering application software, a little bit of review, though we'll take a much deeper dive. And then over the next few weeks, we'll actually learn several different application software Word, PowerPoint, Excel, internet browsing, and I'll throw a little wild card in there for the next week as well. So what is application software? So software refers to any just programs or instructions. We saw that there's system software, so that very specific, strict software that works with your hardware. Application software is the software that goes above that operating system, that system software, goes right above, and that's the kind of software that solves very specific tasks like making a document, editing a photo, editing a video, uh, connecting with your friends, right, on social media. That's going to be application software, as you can see here in some of the examples. So these are typically installed on your computer before they can be used, though we'll see that there's also internet-based software, so that's also an option. So some different synonyms for application software I've included here. So you'll hear me refer to it as software, as applications, programs, apps. Some other terms though you'll hear out there are end user software, so just an application that's for the average user. Then we have application program, a combination of the both, and then executable is another one you might hear. And here's some examples of application software. So we have, email software, calendar software, um, a Compass even, Photoshop, that's photo editing software, Google Drive, that's a cloud software to save your files and documents. Airbnb, that's a short-term rental software, so it lets you rent people's homes for the night, for the weekend, if you don't want to stay in a hotel. PayPal, that's a payment software, right? So if you probably use Venmo or Zelle, those are other examples. We have Skype, one of the leading video chat softwares, not so much these days though. We have Dropbox, another cloud file software. Word and Excel, productivity software. Duolingo here, language learning software. So yeah, software is going to solve very, very specific problems, very specific tasks. And it's usually the kind of software that the average user interacts with, especially in this modern day and age. All right, so software ownership. So before we kind of cover some of the concepts and vocab of using software and the different types, it is important to discuss software ownership, and it does open some questions about the ethics of current licensing agreements. We'll go ahead and define that term in a bit. So first of all, ownership rights. What is ownership rights? Well, in software, it refers to the legal control a person or company has over a software program. So Microsoft has ownership rights over Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Google has ownership rights over Chrome, over YouTube. Um, I'm trying to think of another one. Let's see, Amazon, right, has ownership rights over its different programs, right? If you're on AWS, they're going to have certain software tools, so they own that software. So ownership rights just means that software is actually owned by some kind of entity. It could be a person or organization. So when you purchase or download software, you're actually usually going to agree to a license agreement with that company or person that owns the software. The longer vocab term for that is the end user license agreement. So it's a legal contract between the software creator, the licensor, and the person or organization that uses the software. That would be you, the end user. So end user is always referring to the person who uses that application. So although you get a copy of the software, you usually have to agree to certain rules on how to use it, how to distribute it. Like if you do want to share the software, there are strict rules. They don't want people to like maybe make copies of it in certain cases. In other cases, they might not care. These rules are usually outlined during that installation process where you hit like agree right before you install that program. Now, most of us probably, and I'll be the first to admit, don't read those license agreements. Well, that opens up a bit of a discussion because there's a pretty alarming case that came up on the news. So license agreements and Disney. So go ahead and watch this video where I will open up a discussion regarding this. So, is it fair for Disney to be shielded from this wrongful death lawsuit because of their Disney Plus user agreement? So we already have a discussion this week, so I won't make it an assignment, but I do want to open this up to you. Go ahead and watch the video. It is in the YouTube playlist, or you could click on the link here if you're on the slideshow. Um, Go ahead and watch the video and think about, was it fair what Disney did to this family? Is it right? Did the family get what they deserve? Should things change? What does this mean, right, for the future of license agreements? So let's go ahead and continue. Yeah, you can pause this video and watch it, and then come back to it. All right, so you watched the video, I'm assuming. Yeah, so it's extremely alarming case, right? Very, very sad to hear. I have very strong opinions of it about it. I don't think it's right. If just to put it very plainly, things I do think need to change, but I definitely want to open it up to y'all to think about uh, what needs to change, right? Why is it not fair? And how are these software companies taking advantage, right, of the fact that we don't read the license agreements, right? So yeah, something to think about. All right, so let's move on to open source software. So open source software, or OSS for short, is software that has its source code available to the public, allowing anyone to view, modify, and distribute it. Actually, the software I'm working on for the company I currently work with, our goal is to make it open source. It'll be a application that scientists, physicists, machine learning engineers, developers can use to put together very complicated applications or models and make them work together through like a very, very nice interface. We'll go ahead and define that word in a few slides. And so, yeah, it makes the problem of combining these different components a lot easier to do and gives them kind of a visual tool to do it. Uh, I spent a lot of time building that software, and it's exciting for it to be open source because it means potentially millions of people might use it. So open source software has a few different components, a few criteria to it. So it's always going to be transparent, collaborative, flexible, and licensed for the public. As we discussed, licenses are those rules, right, for how this software is supposed to be used. So transparent means that anyone can see the code and how it works. That also means that it's collaborative. That means anyone around the world can help. So technical developers, software developers can go in and contribute to that code, make it better, find vulnerabilities, improve security, add features, and so forth. It also needs to be flexible, so users can customize that software. So in the case of Linux, we talked about operating systems. We saw Red Hat, Fedora. Those are actual modifications of Linux. So somebody or a group of people went in and said, "Hey, I want to make Linux, give it a different flavor, make it fit my needs better." And so they created these versions of Linux and gave it completely different names. So that's one criteria of open source software, one aspect of it. And then, of course, it has to be licensed for the public. So it has to have special licenses that allow for people to contribute and modify it without getting in trouble. Some of these are called MIT license, Apache license. So if you ever kind of write your own code, you're on GitHub. We'll talk about Git in a sec. And you're publishing your code, you're going to have to choose one of these licenses so that you outline how people can use that code. So a lot of popular software has actually come from being open source, from being an open source project. This includes Linux, like I mentioned, an operating system, very popular amongst developers. Firefox, you've probably used that browser before. Android, if you're an Android user, Android is open source. So there's a whole community of developers trying to make Android better. VLC, that's a video player. Blender, that's a graphics editing tool. And then Git, if you're going to be a programmer someday, Git is a not a must-use tool. It's the standard, right? Every single developer uses Git. And yeah, that's actually open source. So for anybody to go in and help contribute to it. So it's kind of cool. The software community, they're very collaborative. These are people sharing their time, not being paid for it even, and just doing it for the sake of the community, for the sake of users like you. They want to make technology better. So open source is an example of those efforts. So two different types of software we need to discuss is mobile and desktop. So mobile software or mobile apps are just any software or programs, remember that synonym, that runs on your smartphone, tablet, and so forth. So you can see some examples of there, a lot of social media apps. And on the right, we have our desktop software. So just programs that run on PCs, such as laptops and desktops. So a lot of these apps can exist on both. They're going to be different code bases, right? Because it's different operating systems, different devices, but they'll do the pretty much the same thing. Yeah, so like Google Chrome, Word, you can download that to a phone or to your phone. Sorry, or to your laptop. So two different types of software though. So it's important to know those terms. And then we have installed versus cloud software. So installed software is software that is saved directly to your computer. So the best example is Microsoft Office and all its suite of apps, of productivity apps. So you have Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, Excel. So these are usually, although nowadays you can also have it as the cloud software, which we'll see here on the right. For the most part, if you've ever used these applications, they're probably installed to your computer. But nowadays, everybody's moving towards the cloud, cloud software. It's software that runs directly from the internet. So you don't need to save it to your computer. You just really need a browser to, connect to the internet and navigate to that page. And that software runs on the internet. So all the data is handled directly through the internet and not necessarily requiring the resources on your computer. So yeah, a good example of that is Google Suite. So it does all the same things that Office does, but exists on the cloud. And I always provide that example of back in the day working on an essay in college. It's deep into the night. My laptop, it decides to restart while I'm working on that assignment. Boom, 2 hours of work just disappears. It's 2 a.m. That was the last time I ever used Word. Since then, have been moving on to cloud software. So now I use Google Docs here on the right. We'll be discussing on how we'll be taking a very, very in-depth look on how to use these applications over the next few lessons, and also some of this other productivity software. But yeah, since then I've moved on to Google Suite. We'll definitely be covering on how to do that and some of the advantages. But one of the big advantages of cloud software to know is that because your data doesn't exist on your computer, it exists on servers, right? That could be in your city, in the same state, same country, or even across the world sometimes, right? Your data could be stored elsewhere on these physical server computers. Because it's on the internet, it's accessible on the internet. That means you can access it from your phone, from your laptop. And if any of those devices, you drop them in the ocean, that data still exists on the internet. So you'll be able to access it from any device. Usually you just have to log in, right, with your credentials, with your account to see your specific data. So it's still protected. As we know, though, and we'll discuss much, much later in the class, there's always vulnerabilities, right, when you're hooked up to the internet. All right, so if we're going to be learning how to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, internet browsers, we need to know some basic interface vocabulary and interface components. So first, let's divide user interface. So we've talked about command line interface. We've talked about GUI, graphical user interface. Well, what is an interface? Well, it's a part of a system, software, or device that users interact with. That's it. We talked about it a little bit in the DOS, the disk operating system that Microsoft built way, way back in the day. So it's basically those buttons, menus, icons, and other components that you click on, right, to get the software to do what you want it to do. So some very common interface components that we'll be covering today are menus and toolbars. So menus is a list of options or commands that a user can choose from. It helps users navigate through several functions and features. So here you can see the file menu, very typical in word processing documents because you're working on a Word file. So some of the options here we can see we could share that document. So this is actually from Google Docs. So a little bit different than your Word menu. So you could share the document, you can make a new one, you could open a document, you can make a copy of this document. If you're working on the labs and it's going to send you to Google Docs, I encourage you to make a copy of the lab. That way you can edit that document and put in your answers on the same page because you won't be able to edit the ones I share with you. I make them view only. If you remember the read only back when we talked about memory. View only is similar. It means you can't really change, right, that document. I don't let you guys change the labs because then it would change for everybody. But you could always make a copy. You can download. So I've had a couple questions, right? Oh, how do I submit my assignment? We're going to go to File, and you're going to go to download that assignment. It'll ask you, oh, which file type do you want? You could do PDF, you could do doc. Definitely PDF is great when submitting assignments. And here's a few other options. I do put a little icon here, the right click of a mouse, which if you're on a laptop and you have this touchpad, which is like this little square right underneath the keyboard, you can do a right click on a mouse by just doing the right click, right? So notice when I right click, I get a menu. You can do this pretty much on any application, whether you're on a cloud software or installed software. If you click with the right button on your mouse, it's probably going to pull up a menu. In this case, I am on Google Chrome, so it's pulling up the Google Chrome menu. And I can save the page, print it, cast it. That means I can send it to another device. I can search with Google Lens. That means I can uh, search for this for the components on the screen, and it'll scan them and say, oh, do you want to search for toolbars or menus or software interface? I can go back to the previous page, reload the page, exit full screen. If you're ever stuck, if you ever want to find more options, I always invite you to right click. That's always going to give you a whole menu of options. And then you can order what the computer to do whatever you want it to do. So let's go ahead and do exit full screen. And there you go. I'm out of the full screen. I'm going to go ahead and go back to full screen. All right, so toolbars. Toolbars are another important interface component we're going to get very familiar with. Toolbars are a set of icons or command buttons that are selected with your mouse, a pen, right? If you have a pen input device. I have a laptop that uses a pen actually, or a finger. So actually that same laptop, it does handle touch. So you click on those buttons with mouse, pen, or finger, and it'll pull off one of those commands. So if I go ahead and exit full screen, notice I did the right click. I have a toolbar here at the top. I can change the name of the slides. I can comment or change the view only. I can resize, gives me some file options, and look, download. So file, this is common throughout many applications. It does a lot of the same things. For me, the most important button on this toolbar right now is the present. So I'm going to present it in full screen. So toolbars are important because they give you a whole bunch of options. Now, sometimes it can be overwhelming, right? But what you can always do when you're on a toolbar, and this is true for most applications, you can hover over a button. So let's see. I want to see if it's because I'm on a web-based or internet-based software, cloud-based. It's not really giving me many options. Oh, here it does. So elements, text. Though these aren't very useful. If this is my recording software. If I hover, it says open source properties. If I hover over here, let's see if it gives me any other ones. Audio mixer menu. A more useful one might be if I go to Word. Let's go to Word. So on Word, if I go blank document, should give me some information. Here we go. So clear all formatting. So it gives me a little hover. These are called tooltips when you hover over a button and it tells you what to do. That's a tooltip or gives you extra information. Sometimes there's not always tooltips. On Word, they do a really good job of putting a bunch of tooltips. Paste, add content on the clipboard to your document. Some of these don't have tooltips. This one does. Format Painter, so it gives me a bunch of information. So you don't have to click on it to see what it does. Sometimes you could just hover over the button. And as always, you can always right click. Right click, depending on where you right click, it'll give you different options. So I right click here, gives me that. Right click here, gives me that. Right click here, gives me that. I'm gonna minimize. Minimize, let's go back. to our presentation. Full screen. Yeah, this one doesn't have any tooltips. They got to do a better job. All right, let's see. So toolbars. So yeah, the commands. In Word, they even tell you the group of commands, and then there's tabs. That's going to open a whole menu of options, just like we saw here on the left. Some other important interface options are search bars. If you ever see a search bar, use it. It's probably going to help you find whatever you're looking for. In the case of Windows, Windows will often have a search bar. So here you can't, oh yeah, you can't see it. Oh no, you can't see it on this screen actually. Let me go to Word. So Word has a search bar. Let's say I want to figure out how to, let's put, change the background color. Oh, there you go. Let's see, background, insert picture, online pictures, background, insert a background, picture image. Let's put color. Yeah, page color. There you go. I can change the page color to green. I didn't know how to find that particular setting. It would have probably taken me quite a few clicks through all these buttons and menus. A search bar is a great shortcut to get to any option you want. If you're on Word, I know you can't, or sorry, if you're on Windows, there's a search bar to find pretty much any option. So you can, if you want to uninstall a program, you can type in uninstall. I know you can't see it right now on my screen. Let me go ahead and take a screenshot though of that search bar. And notice I actually didn't click on the screen to do this. Let me change that page color back. Page color. Oh, I still caught some of the color there. But yeah, Windows, it always has this search bar at the bottom. You can search for options, for files, for programs. Pretty much anything that lives on your computer, you can use that search bar for. And even if it's not on your computer, it'll take you to the internet if you can't find it on your computer. So very useful to use search bars. We'll take a deeper dive on those different applications on how those could be useful. All right, let's see. So we're going to present. Oh, I hover. Oh, look, it gives me a tooltip. And this time the tooltip gives me a keyboard shortcut. So a lot of times the things you can do by clicking, you can actually do through your keyboard. Why would you use your keyboard if clicking is perfectly fine? Because you can get really fast by using your keyboard. So some very common commands. The three I want to focus on right now are Control C, Control V, and Control Z. Let's throw a fourth one in there. Let's do Control F. All right. So let's say I'm working on this presentation and I don't want to call this search bars. I want to call it common keyboard shortcuts. So first of all, if you're unfamiliar with highlighting, highlighting means you can select text. And from there, there's many different things you could do with that text. So to select text, you can either click and drag from one side to the other. This is a left click if you're on your mouse. If you're on a touchpad, you just click and hold. And then maybe with your other finger, with your other hand, you would slide that hand over while you're holding. So yeah, click and drag right there. So common keyboard shortcuts, I want to copy this text. I could pull up the menu with the right click, and I can certainly copy that way. Or I could do Control C. If you're on a Mac, that's Command C, not Control C. So if I do Command C on a Mac, Control C on a Windows computer, and then let me highlight this. You don't have to highlight this way where you click and drag. You could do a double click or a triple click, and it'll highlight the entire line. I'm gonna do Control V, which tells me it's gonna paste whatever I selected. So I copy the selected text with Control C. I'm gonna do Control V. Oh, common keyboard shortcuts. It made it really small though. Let me make that big so you guys can see it. Common keyboard shortcuts. But that's a mistake, right? I can't call this side of the slide common keyboard shortcuts. There's probably the most useful shortcut to know is Control Z, the undo, because we're humans, we make mistakes. So you Control Z a few times, and boom, I did it twice because I made two changes and it undid both of those changes. So every time I hit Control Z, it'll undo the previous change. If I want it back, I'll show you a bonus one, Control Y. It goes back to wherever it was before. So yeah, I use these a lot as a programmer, as a developer. Another really useful one is, oh, here I'm on ChatGPT, or let's say I'm reading a scholarly article on computers. Oh, and it's a super long document. Oh, and I'm just looking for one vocab word. I'm looking for um let's say I'm looking for the word personal, right? Personal computers. Or I'm looking, let me see. Interest motivations. So they got interest motivations. Let's say it's for a paper I'm writing on education. So I could certainly look through this entire document and look for keywords like learning, education, schools, or I could hit Control F and notice this little search bar comes up. And then let me type in the word I'm looking for, learning. So now Google Chrome is going through this entire web document. It could do this for pretty much any document that has text. Now, there's always exceptions. And look, computer learning motivations, family learning. If I hit enter, just using my keyboard, no clicks, it's going to take me through all the keywords that I'm looking for. So in this case, it's learning. So Control F, very useful if you're working on reading through a very long document. You need to find very specific text. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. There are two videos that I have added to the playlist. For those of you who are brand new uh, beginners to computers or are still struggling, especially for those adult learners. I will be putting a video on how to use a mouse, the different buttons you can click, and then also the trackpad, right? Because if you're on a laptop, it's no longer a mouse, right? It's a different input-output device. In this case, just input, right? Because all we're doing is clicking on it. So I'll put two videos in that week 3 playlist for you to watch. So definitely check it out if you need extra help. Uh, on this gestures, tips, and tricks for trackpad, even if you're pretty good with computers, you might learn some pretty cool tricks if you're on a Windows computer. And as always, right, you can always do your own research, find, different tricks, keyboard shortcuts, trackpad shortcuts, mouse shortcuts by just, using ChatGPT, using Google. We'll definitely take a deep dive on internet browsing. So I'll show you how to become better, web researchers and find the information you're looking for. All right, that's it for this week. I'll see you all for the next one.